Hi, Terry.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I'm good. I've been wanting to join this meeting for quite some time, but I always had meetings. And today, my first time.
We're always glad to have you when you can make it.
This time, it's like 4 to 7 p.m. is like when North America starts their day, and it's always busy.
Yeah, same with me.
How is it going?
Yeah,
Since we
good.
last met?
Yeah, well, I've been doing a lot of sort of crossover work, really, connecting with the other SIGs and some of the project teams, and just trying to make sure that the overarching work that's going on is staying somewhat aligned to the best practices, getting people to use the common vocabulary and notation, and generally try and sync things up. Hopefully what we can start to do now is fill out the community and resource pages with more input from the project teams. CD event stuff, for example, I will link that in once we've got that website up to scratch, and that will connect us across into that piece of work. Hi, Tara.
Good greetings. Good morning to me. Good evening to you. Hey, Fatih.
Hey, Tara.
Where are you based?
Sweden, Stockholm.
Ah, good grief. So it's even later for you.
I am
sorry, I should have tipped you off. The boss is here today, so we're going to have to behave ourselves.
Why would that stop us? Come on now. We're too old for that nonsense behavior. That's cool. All right, hang on. CD, let's see, GitHub, CD Foundation. Are you already taking notes, Terry? Or should I go ahead and grab it?
Feel free to. I've set the template up, but
okay.
You're welcome to.
SIG Best Practices. I went to New York last week, and there we go. And it was just, it was nigh impossible to try and have proper social distancing and all the other things, because I still have someone in the house who cannot be fully vaxxed. The vaccine gave her tachycardia. It was really scary. So I tried to be careful, and I wasn't able to because it was cold and the outdoor dining stuff has gone away. So I've been sleeping in our RV for the past week to, just get through quarantine. And let me tell you, Northern California is having a cold snap. So it's been a very exciting 5 days. I'm glad tonight I can actually sleep in the house again. Oh, okay. Hack MD. Let's see. All right, so what's on the agenda?
So key update from me. Yesterday I joined in with the supply chain maturity working group, and we had a very interesting discussion. I gave them a briefing about what we've been doing and what the intentions are, and that led us into a fairly detailed discussion about their plans for a maturity model within the software supply chain space.
So the maturity measures document is then in conjunction with that, or that is the working document?
Yeah. So the document that I shared with you yesterday is their initial working document, and it overlaps quite neatly with a chunk of what we've been planning to do for a while now in terms of the assessment model. So their intent was to come up with a way of assessing the maturity of a given organization or offering in that supply chain space. So I think it makes sense for us to work together on that.
Okay. And
they're looking at the fine detail of, explicit behaviors in the engineering delivery sense. So it makes sense for us probably to concentrate on the more business and commercial aspects of that readiness and capability, and then we can meet in the middle.
okay, it feels, yeah, I started going through it last night. Thank you. Is the goal that this would eventually be hosted on the website? Or are they?
Yeah, so the intent is that we'll provide a home for it within best practices, and then it becomes a reference asset that everyone can utilize.
Because this feels like a really natural contribution. Copy. Okay, and I see David Bendery is on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, that's good. We're actually working on this right now, the beginnings of this at MongoDB. So it's perfect. The measurement part specifically.
Yeah, so I think it's a timely piece of work. I think it feeds into quite a lot of different activities, and it would be nice if we could make this into a sort of self-assessment survey, so that people can find it and then fill it out and get some information about their current maturity in the space.
Does that I feel like a lot of those are encapsulated in the DevOps survey. I haven't looked at it. So Google now owning Dora means that Google owns the survey, which is good and bad. I should go look at that to see how they approach that, because that's meant to be driven like, because I see a note here in the document that you left. Or somebody left. Did I completely miss that? Best practices language and other CDF usage, which a lot of that comes out of the state of DevOps report. So there might be something we can snag there. Okay, yeah. Cool.
And what I've suggested there is that it's correct to refer to this as maturity, but when thinking about how to categorize these things, I suggested that everyone consider it from the perspective of survivability. So, when you're looking at that first level of maturity, really what you're saying is, what are the key things that you absolutely must have in order to survive for any period of time trying to do continuous delivery? And then at the next level, what are the next things that you should add that will increase your odds of survivability? And then as you reach the higher maturity levels, what you're talking about is more of the convenience pieces that reduce your cognitive load and improve your ability to be efficient and effective. And hopefully that makes it easier to think about, which pieces of the puzzle should sit within each maturity level.
Good. Richer optimization. So another way of looking at it would be correctness as like the lowest bar, right? Versus velocity, right? The most important thing is that you have product correctness. Eventually you get speed, right? As one kind of variation of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that one again, you can bring it back to what that means to the survivability of your project team or your organization. You know, if you're operating in a field where survivability relies on you doing things accurately, then absolutely that would be the fundamental. But following social media, that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case for everybody right now.
Oh my God. That's like, wow, that's amazing. So was there discussion about how to measure this stuff? So one of the things we've been talking about, for example, with my team is telemetry and instrumentation. Like, all right, well, we know what we don't know. Okay, well, let's start figuring out how to measure that. And hopefully out of that, we'll start learning other things that we don't even know that we don't know. To measure that. Some of these are encapsulated in this, but a lot of them aren't, so that this is a good checklist to review. And that led us to start thinking about the mechanics of instrumentation. And I think we talked about this before, which is like cloud events, trace-based, or if you're not there yet, what are the best practices around logging within the CI system? And I think to correlate to this would add additional power, because it's like, oh, well, here are the things that you measure, but how the hell do you do that? Right. And so that could be a really great opportunity to kind of get the projects to weigh in on their particular best practice around, well, if you do this, then you can shove stuff, and it's enabled for open telemetry, and you could use Prometheus, for example. Right.
Yeah, and I can see that we have a CD events member lurking in the background who may want to jump in at this point. And
hey, yeah.
Oh, hello there. I did not see you.
Hi, I'm here, Emil. So yeah. So what was there a question or more a statement that, of course, yeah, events could be used there for the supply chain as well to propagate such information. Sure.
Yeah, it feels like a nice tie-up.
Just introduce that it's certainly within CD events around measuring things like durametrics and stuff like that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. So the CD events today, it's a very early phases still, or very early stages on the CD event spec, but we are defining a number of well-defined events for certain occurrences in the CI/CD system, and the intended start of such chain of events would be your source change being committed or merged in some source code repository manager, which is also often the start of a DORA metrics where something is merged. And then we have events saying that an artifact is built, we have events saying that the test is performed, and we also have events for deployment. So when a system would emit such events, and then those events would then be related to the source chain test, was actually the source of that binary, which was eventually been deployed. We could then calculate the lead time for from source chain to deployment. And we have events coming in about incidents or issues, whatever you want to call them now. So we can also see when faults have occurred in a deployed version of a binary, and then see how long it takes to recover from such faults and fix such problems in deployment space.
And CD events are going to be part of the larger cloud events model, right? I think that's what I recall.
Well, is
Or is
currently it's sort of vice versa. So CD events is currently an application on top of cloud events. So cloud events is very generic. It more or less just defines the context, the frame or the headers, so to say, of the event itself. But then the payload is very free. It's totally free in cloud events, sorry. And then what we do in CD events is that we define certain specific payload structures, which should be sent then to inform on certain occasions from the CI/CD pipeline. And currently we have cloud events as the binder there. We bind our CD events onto cloud events, but there is no strict dependency that it needs to be cloud events for all future. Still, the payload could be the same, even if the bearer will be something else than cloud events. Yeah.
I think this is one of those areas where we can potentially avoid a lot of duplicated effort, because what we're going to be doing here within best practices and in the supply chain maturity model is drilling into the requirements for the things that we need to measure. And then if we can feed that into the CD events work, we can carry a lot of that weight and help to provide a good set of requirements for what the events model needs to do to align to the overarching problem space.
Yeah, so one more comment on the supply
ahead.
chain data. The artifacts that are then notified through CD events currently, these events are very thin still, very small in size and don't contain much information. But I foresee that we could quite soon get in supply chain specifics also into these events notifying about an artifact, for example. So we could, for example, have in total attestations there or signed signatures and such things, either as part of the event or referenced from the events if they are stored elsewhere. And also SBOMs should then be somehow referenced from the event, so we can see where what has been included in this specific artifact, apart from the actual source chain that triggered the build itself. But of course, there's a lot of other things as well, part of an artifact.
I see I haven't been paying attention, apologies, but I do see there seems to be a proof of concept in the repo. Is that being actively worked on, or was that a thing that was previous and now that's not the main focus?
It is.
I guess I was looking for where's the current canonical definition
of CD events itself, you mean?
Yeah.
So there is a website, cdevents.dev, which contains which actually Terry is working on as well, refining, which is showing the documentation for the current events that we have, the specification.
Okay.
But the proof of concept, there is one proof of concept which was made over a year ago, last summer more or less, of a very, very even earlier stage of the protocol, which more or less showed how to interoperate, if we will come to interoperability soon as well, so interoperate between these different tools in the CI/CD domain. So given examples there, so that the POC deploys some different tools, Tecton and Kepton and Spinnaker is lately have been added. And so I guess those were the first tools that were there. And so those events just show how to trigger actions in these different tools without them even knowing each other and knowing about each other. But then there is also, there was, I think, just before the summer, it was a talk on, or was it in Austin, right? Eric and Andrea had a talk on DORA metrics with CD events, where they also where they showed a POC for that part, where they didn't show all these 4 DORA metrics, but I think 2 of them at least were shown in the demo there.
Here it is. Copy link. Notes. Oh God, no, not that. There we go.
And I think that medium term, this this sort of standardized metrics problem may actually be one of the leading drivers for CD events as a standard, because it solves a problem that nobody else is really tackling right now, in a way that you'd be able to do uniformly across, you know, multiple different platforms. So I think this will become much more significant as we dive into it and make these measuring techniques a bit more visible and obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I could think of is the folks that have reused the open telemetry mechanisms for CI instrumentation rather than pure ops. But that's not the main focus of it, right? It's a happy ability. And to your point, it is definitely not to the level of enrichment that we're trying to do with this stuff.
No,
Okay.
and about open telemetry and observability, I think we haven't really come into any detailed discussions there, but for sure I see that we also need to have some way to reference between the spans for trace IDs provided through such
yeah, I mean, if there was
observability,
I mean,
and
I
the
think,
CD events.
yeah, I think if we're mindful of the opportunity there so that the payloads are reasonably neutrally transferable, right, or at least accessible, that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. What's next steps for your SIG, Emil?
Continue working on the spec and improving, adding some more event types, being more well. We do add more event types, but we also refactor the events themselves still. I mean, we haven't reached the 1.0 version, and we are still evaluating what is the best way to do this. So we're looking into different specific topics, but for example, on how to reference between different events, reference one event to another. That's one topic we discussed yesterday. So it was actually a recent topic.
I guess my meta question, I'll ask it as soon as you started talking. I realized the thing I really wanted to know, which is at what point are we going to start to see that being instrumented into the projects?
Mm-hmm. So I think we have these proof of concept implementations now in Tecton, in Jenkins, and other places already. But of course, they are just proof of concept implementations and or plugins, or what you should call them there. But I think before we have reached the 1.0 version of this spec, I don't think that any of those tools might release their CD event support officially, say that they support it. That's my guess anyway. But maybe some front runners could do it early, like Tecton maybe, and maybe some more, so they can pave the way for others to come in. But we don't know which of these tools that will be the first. Tecton is one obvious candidate because we have one of their maintainers, one of the Tecton maintainers in the CD events team as well. And he's very keen on getting this supported by Tecton.
Yeah, Andrea or?
Yeah, Andrea Fritoli. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's chicken and egg, right? Do we get early adoption to help validate the 1.0 release, or do we call it 1.0 and then try to get adoption?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So we can't wait, of course, too long before we release a 1.0. It needs to be at least within a year or something. I mean, it needs to happen during next year, I think. Otherwise, we might miss the chance.
But I think there's also the opportunity here for us to be driving the need for adoption from a best practices standpoint.
So
Yes.
not this year,
Exactly.
but next year, Tara. Sorry.
But, well, this coming year.
This coming year, yeah.
Yes. This coming year. Thank you.
2023, yeah. Yeah. Right.
This time of year, you have to be clear about that.
I don't promise things that I can't do. Yeah.
I'm at one of those companies that does the horrible thing where our fiscal year is offset by 11 months.
Oh.
So so we're about to come to the end of fiscal year 2023 in January. And it just, my brain, I hate that. I know why they do it that way, but it's just maddening. Because next year, 2024, wait, what? Okay. So yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about, Terry, which is, being able to have the reference implementations available. We probably don't want to do it on the POCs because those aren't going to match the spec or not solidly enough. So the focus should be then, I guess, to your earlier point, to try to ensure that the metrics measurement and the spec lines up as strongly as can be done.
Yeah. And again, this is another area where Jenkins X is looking to implement, and this would tie in with some of the other supply chain work that they've been doing. So, there's plenty of opportunity for us to get a reference implementation out there. We might need to support that with some extra warm bodies to help get stuff written and deployed, but there's absolutely a strong opportunity for us to set the pace on this and tie things together a bit more cleanly.
How is it now? Is Jenkins X written in Java nowadays, or is it written in some other language?
Jenkins X is Go based.
Go,
yeah,
okay.
Go.
Because we have a Go SDK. That's this SDK that is most mature for CD events. That's the Go SDK, which is used by Tecton and also then Jenkins X.
Yeah, and Jenkins sits on top of Tecton. So there's certain elements that we'll get for free if Tecton goes.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of this is closer to being done than it looks, because there's already been some proof of concept work done with Captain and Tecton, and those tools are available within Jenkins X. So it's just going to be about building on what's already been done and tying it together.
And I remember when the Captain folks reached out when I was still on the TOC. It's nice to see them doing so well. Okay, this is cool. I almost feel like, do we want to have either take this meeting or carve out a separate time to just kind of workshop through the metrics to the spec? Or do we want to try and async it? I feel like it might go faster if we just grab some more time to just start chunking through it. Look at you and me and whoever else wants to sit in on that, David.
Yeah, I think it'd be good if we could get David involved in that as well.
Okay. Well, unless maybe we can just say for the next meeting, we can bug David to say, hey, we want to workshop this in the agenda. Okay. Sounds good. Next thing is there anything else on this, or next thing on the agenda is interoperability white paper?
Yeah, I added the two next topics there. So some of you might remember we started writing this white paper very early, like towards end of 2020. And this was supposed to be published during 2021, which never happened. So an idea here is to revive this work and get it published. because we got lots of contributions to the early version of the white paper, which I will put the links there, and made some case study type of things in it. But those case studies may be more complicated now, or maybe outdated, or we need to go and ask for permission from those people. So I was reading the paper this week. I removed those case study pieces and left the main body of the document there to simplify it, because it's been there for 2 years and we should really get this out of the door. And those case study parts could be turned into actual case studies. That is kind of the idea. And this topic will be discussed during tomorrow's Interoperability SIG meeting. So if you want to take part in the conversation, I just want to bring this to your attention, because interoperability has been one of the main areas we have been working on within the CDF. And we should really push information out there.
That sounds great. I'm thinking about, Terry, what are you thinking? Is under, would this be a resource or an, because we probably start to need rethink about how some of this stuff gets organized.
So
yeah.
So we've got some of the under resources, but it sounds like this might be something that fits better in the community section as a a more narrative piece of work. That's the resource stuff tends to be, here are pointers to other things that you might find useful, whereas the community section is about, here's stuff that's actively going on within the CDF that directly impinges on best practices and how to do things. So I think, trying to incorporate that in that space, and then fill it out with some more white papers on different niche areas around that would be a great fit.
Okay. I'd be happy to put together a PR and mock it into the site. Afati, did you want the V1 published, or
No,
do you think it's
yeah, V2, I think we can focus on V2, because V1, like, some of those people are not around anymore and they probably are not working for those companies. So again, this, depending on what SIG Interop says tomorrow, the idea is to work on V2, and once we finalize it, give it to LF creative team, put it on PDF, and then publish it like CDF white paper.
okay?
And probably maybe Q1 2023, because we are nearly done with this year.
Great. Okay.
And I didn't remember, like, we had like 20 people contributing to this. Like, it was really like a collaborative effort. We should have published it, but yeah, better late than never.
Okay, I mean, worst case, we could decide to publish it as with an archive tag or something.
So that's the news part about that. And the other topic I include there, unless we don't have any other questions or comments about white paper.
No, go ahead.
So the developer proactive is build, test, practice. I've been looking at the best practice website, and I've seen some items under continuous integration and continuous testing section. And I recently read a short book, like about 100 pages on developer productivity engineering, and that's reminded me some of the work I've done in the past. And those things, like, my question here is like around build and test practices. How detailed can we be with those best practice? For example, build avoidance type of stuff. I don't remember seeing it on best practice website. Does this type of stuff fit into best practices? Like using cache for speeding up the builds, using test avoidance for skipping tests, for example, or having some clever analysis to see what parts of the code base change so you can skip certain test cases, or even like migrating from a set of tools to different set of tools to improve build test times, or even changing the hardware infrastructure. Would these be considered as best practices?
So there's a sort of threshold here in terms of how we drill down into this, because the learn section of best practices is intended to be completely generic. So the things that we discuss in there should be applicable to all systems. But as you get into the finer detail, there are best practices that only apply to certain scenarios, and those scenarios tend to relate to the type of tooling that you're using to solve the problem. And so the original intent was to treat those things as case studies within the community section, to say, okay, if you're solving this problem with Jenkins, here's what's best practice for using Jenkins, and here's how you handle those very fine detail cases that are applicable to might not be applicable to Jenkins X because it's the inverse model of handling your event system. So that's a case where I think we've got a big gap in the community section, where the intent was to get each of the projects to start to write about best practices relating to their individual tool sets. But the challenge has been, finding people with the time and inclination to document rather than write code.
And I think it's kind of a three-way, right? So I think there's an element that ties this to the measurements, the measures, right? If you think about, okay, you're at a what did you call it? The survivable level of investment. What does that mean? Well, it probably means correctness. How do you measure it? Code coverage. Oh, thanks, Emil. How do you measure it? Maybe use a code coverage tool, and then maybe there's an example of a particular project that's using something along those lines. Or it's like, oh, if you have like a security focus, are you incorporating like snake checks or similar, right? And then I think where it really gets interesting with developer productivity is, to me, and have you read the SPACE framework yet, Fatih? That's another pretty good one. Yeah, where it's really about optimizing around velocity and correctness on all of those things, with not just tooling, but also process enhancements, communication models, all of those things in aggregate, optimizing your organization in a more holistic way, right? And then measurement there is actually a combination of instrumented telemetry, the way that we think about metrics, but also things like surveys and other types of stuff that, is a totally different model. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here, but I'm leaning towards the case study model, just because there's so many details. Like, what are the build systems that enable you to do decent caching, right? But if we bring it in too prescriptively, people are just going to check out, because the uplift, for example, to switch your old CMake system to Bazel is probably not one that many companies are prepared to make unless there's no other choice, right? That kind of stuff. It's like, we don't want to really get into the business of prescription at that level. And the other concern that I have is that a lot of the tools in this space, especially for testing, start to get very commercial. Like, there's not a lot of open source test frameworks. And so how do we want to, I don't think anybody is against us talking about commercial things, but if we do it in any way other than this is just an example, then it looks like we're like potentially making recommendations for commercial software, which is not what we want to do. So, but no, I do think maybe exploring this as part of like community case study is definitely a cool opportunity.
I think there is probably also an opportunity to touch on some of this in the reference architecture work, because in many cases you're getting into territory here where it's a trade-off rather than a best practice. And so, for example, when you're looking at caching, you can reduce your workload and speed up part of your software delivery process by caching a bunch of things. But say one of the things that you're caching is the this. So CVE checking, for example. Well, the CVEs are being updated on a real-time basis daily. So the more caching you have, the more likely you are to have 0 days going out in your code base because you're not checking the code base every time you build it. So this is where you have to teach people how to make the right choice for their particular product scenario, to say, you know, which of these things are the most important factors, and therefore here's how you should optimize the shape of this process for your scenario. And it's not a case that there's a one-size-fits-all best practice. It's actually, once you get to this level of granularity, you're going to face some really hard decisions, and those decisions may not hold for the lifetime of your product. So you may have to change those decisions over time.
I love that example because churn introduces its own challenges, right? So, and we're having this exact conversation right now with my team because we build images that are comprehensive. They include the OS, distro, and a tool chain or two. And so anytime something changes, we have to rebuild the whole thing. It's like, we need to break this out. Do we need to separate the OS from the tool chain? And do we actually want to incorporate the tool chain, or do we want to mount it because we could use EFS or similar, right? And so it's to try to address this exact problem, which is to maximize not having an insecure image, but also not churning so frequently that people are constantly out of date and getting irritated because they don't have a stable platform to use.
Yeah, another reason why I brought this topic, because, like, again, as I mentioned, that book took me 10 years. Like, I was part of this huge build test improvement initiative quite some time ago. And I recently talked to someone from a different vendor, and they are doing some work here. And when the person asked me, like, how can they contribute? And I was thinking about best practices. You know, SIG is for them, as a place for them to come and talk about these things. Like, I can still tell them, yeah, they can come and talk about what they are doing there, but they are, again, they are vendors, as you highlighted, like they are working with a commercial tool, but isn't there a middle ground here? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly why we have that community section.
Yeah.
And it's just to make sure that we have clarity, like this is a use case or a case study set distinct from this is the CD best practice taxonomy, right? So we just have a different section. Okay. And we just want to make that, and that was how we meant to incorporate that. But absolutely, like we have vendors, it's like, hey, here's what we're doing. And ideally, here's, you know, some of the projects or SDKs or whatever that we have, and we can tie them back and tag it in such a way. It's like, oh, well, you're looking at someone who's really investing in, you know, from the, what's the learn part of the site, and they're looking at continuous testing. And then, as you know, in your case, the vendor comes in, they have a case study. We could link to it. Like, here's an example of someone trying to do this. It might not be 100%, but you know, it gives you something more concrete to look at.
Okay. Then I was completely wrong thinking this would be a place for them to come and contribute. So yeah.
No, we always wanted that. We just haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can help them. We should probably like make a template or something to figure out, or I would bug Nicola to get a template that people could just download, fill it in, and then PR it just to make sure they're conforming to the site rules.
Yeah, that should be easy enough to do.
Did you have somebody?
Nice to do some...
Oh, sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you have someone in mind right now, Fatih?
Yeah, I actually I met with this person and I was supposed to meet again. And I will remind him again that we can have like a focused conversation around this topic. Maybe like if he says, yeah, it's cool, then I can bring that person here to take part in the conversation. Because like, again, you know, we all know this like fast feedback loops and so on. And if your build sucks, you can't really claim you are doing CI stuff or whatever. And that is kind of how I was thinking this, because like if builds take like 10 hours, 20 hours, and if they are not stable, and if the developers continuously rebuilding or attempting to rebuild stuff, that increases the problems other parts of the organization, other developers could face, and that could alienate developers, that could, you know, even result in worse things, people leaving their jobs because they can't make things happen. It's like, that's how I was thinking, like trying this topic to best practice, like you should look for improving your build time before even claiming to do continuous integration and so on, type of things. But I will hopefully get back about this topic with that person.
And I think there's also an opportunity here for us to maybe host some deliberate innovation sessions where, you know, we take a couple of technologies and say, well, what happens if we take this tool and cram it together with CD events? What would that enable us to do if we enhance the capabilities of those tools to be compatible in that way? So just do some, you know, daydreaming sessions on, you know, what might be possible if.
Imagine at the next CDCon, we could even have like hack sessions, like bring your build system, instrument it with CD events, you know, who can get the max metrics data out of their builds. That might be tricky, but it could be fun.
Actually, thanks for noting CDCon, Tara. So we haven't finalized the plans yet, but we nearly identified when, where, how the next CDCon is happening. So we plan to co-locate CDCon with GitOpsCon, so they will run together to, you know, have broader coverage around CD, GitOps type of stuff. And it will take place on May 8th and 9th, just before Open Source Summit in Vancouver. And the details are not available yet, but at least we know when and where it will happen. And it will be hosted by both CNCF and CDF to have broader reach across our communities.
Vancouver,
and what you said, like, yeah, it's like this design summit type of session or hack sessions. I am talking with events team to have a room or two for this type of, you know, focus sessions. People may want to, you know, come together and hack things around or discuss things until the topics are dead and so on. So more info will be available as soon as events team finalizes that. Yeah.
So Tara, this is you being buttered up to being volunteered for something.
I will happily participate now that it's not going to be in Texas anymore.
Yeah, I like Vancouver a lot. It is like that convention
Beautiful
center.
city.
I don't know if you've been there. Like, it is next to water. You can just see the water. People taking this flight taxis or whether they fly to the islands. I don't remember the name. But it's very nice convention center, and city is nice as well.
Yeah, I haven't been in a long time, and never for a conference, but that's a very, the Pacific Northwest is a very pretty part of the world.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. Well, I think we've got some good meaty stuff here. I'm going to try and Terry, just FYI, I'm going to. Oh wait, no, not the next one. The next one we're going to try and get David and try and map up events to metrics, but my CISO is currently in Madrid. I was supposed to be in Madrid, but I was in New York last week and I couldn't travel that much. So when she gets back, I'm going to practice interviewing her. And then hopefully we can get kind of a 5 or 10 question thing that we can start to reach out to other executives, business leaders around this and start to develop that part of the engagement. So, okay. If you have, by the way, I meant to ask you, because I know you talk to a lot of people, but if there's like a set of things that you'd like to ask prospective customers, for example, clients that you might have that you want to seed, let me know.
Yeah, I think that applies to both of us here, Vati.
Yeah, either. I do know one of the questions you ask is, are you going to be using this for scary militaristic purposes? But hopefully most of the people we talk to, we don't need to worry about that. All right. Anything else that we have for today?
That's all on my list.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to try and capture a few more notes here, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.